All right, let's get this out of the way from the beginning. Cars are safer than they've ever been before, but there's nothing safe about 2 tons of rolling steel, plastic, and glass. In the early days of motoring, safety was the responsibility of the driver. Don't drive like an idiot, and you won't be in an accident. And safety features were essentially just performance features. Better ride, better handling, better brakes, better steering, better tires. A better car was a safer car, or at least more forgiving towards bad drivers. But it was apparent that accidents did happen, and there were some things they could do to improve driver and passenger safety. Now you would think bumpers would be one of the earliest safety features, but a bumper isn't there to protect the occupants, it's there to protect the vehicle. But it became apparent early on that if you are in an accident and bouncing around the interior of your car, what you don't want are a lot of hard surfaces, protruding objects, and sharp edges. In short, there was a move to softer, rounder surfaces, and in some cases, even padding. But not bouncing around the interior of your car in an accident is a better option, hence the seatbelt. And many manufacturers were offering seatbelts as an option by the mid-50s. But safety didn't sell, so many cars never ended up with seatbelts. By the mid-60s, seatbelts were mandated. And why wouldn't they be? Studies had shown that wearing a seatbelt could reduce injuries and even prevent death as much as 2/3 of the time, and its odds of increasing your chances of injury or death was only somewhere between 5 and 10%, and then typically only in cases where being ejected from your seat or even the vehicle itself prevented you from being crushed. But still, people refused to wear them. In fact, many cars experienced the end of their existence without the seatbelts ever being used. So by the mid-80s, states were starting to force you to play the odds. For the first few years, the biggest impact this had was increasing revenues as people were still refusing to wear them, as they were uncomfortable and inconvenient. Which brings us to passive restraints, which started out as automatic seatbelts, which seemed kind of cool and futuristic when they were introduced, but quickly became considered annoying. But it wasn't long until they were replaced by airbags, a safety feature that is in fact passive, but can kill you. I'm not referring to the hundreds of thousands of airbags that were recalled for prematurely exploding shrapnel into your face, nor am I referring to the fact that airbags are safety technology with a shelf life, and the longer it exists in your car without being used, the more likely it is to fail. What I'm referring to is the reason why you have the ability to shut off your passenger airbags. If you are a healthy, robust individual, an airbag is a safety feature. But if you are any way frail, it becomes more of a physical assault, becoming a safety risk. If you are, for example, a child, a senior citizen, or someone who's shorter and lighter than average. There's also the concern about structural safety. This meant bigger cars with heavier built frames. In short, the biggest battering ram wins. And many people still hold to this ideal, partly because insurance statistics support it. With the move to unitized construction, the battering ram philosophy doesn't really work, which is why there have been numerous studies related to impact types and crumple zones to help manufacturers build a car that will sacrifice itself for your safety. The only problem with this is real-world accidents don't happen in a controlled laboratory-type environment, and you can never predict the location, angle, or force of an impact. So even though they are safer, there can never be any guarantee of surviving a major collision. And there has been a downside to all this development in the form of visibility. The age of wraparound glass with a 360-degree panoramic view around you is a thing of the past because it puts you at too much risk. So ultimately, they've increased your chances of surviving an accident by increasing your chances of having one. And crash avoidance is still the best option, which brings us to anti-lock brakes. When anti-skid brake systems were being forced into production, it was predicted that it would have a huge impact on reducing the number of accidents. And the theory was that by stopping the brakes from locking up, it would prevent you from going into a skid and therefore enable you to avoid the accident altogether. And although it did have a big impact on reducing accidents, it was nowhere near as big as predicted. And the reason was that taking the skid out of a panic stop didn't take the panic out of a panic stop. And perhaps it was just being overly optimistic to believe that drivers who didn't have the skill, experience, and awareness to pump their brakes in an emergency would have the skill, experience, and awareness to turn in a panic stop. Which puts us back where we started. Safety is ultimately the responsibility of the driver. And manufacturers are not only aware of this, but they have no faith in it. If you want an example of this, watch the latest commercial of pretty much any mainstream automobile, and it'll have the same message. If you can't drive, we have an app for that. Blind spot warning, lane departure warning, impact warning, adaptive cruise control. And some would argue that all of these driver nannies are effectively making even worse drivers. And if you can pass the hardest part of the driver's test simply by pressing a button on your dashboard, it's hard to argue that it's making them better. So naturally, the next step in safety is quite simply to prevent you from driving. Self-driving cars. And futurists have been predicting self-driving bubble pods as both a safety and convenience feature for more than 50 years. But the technology still isn't there yet, and people are killing themselves off on a semi-regular basis proving this. So until that technology is here to save your life, if you're really concerned about safety, what I suggest is put down your phone and don't drive like an idiot.